Yo, what's going on? It's your main man, Rick the Dawn. Hey, welcome to the show. I just finally caught up with Survivor, and I just want to talk about it real quick. The first thing I want to point out here is, will a underdog win this season? And I'm asking that question because I feel like the power players are being punished at a all-time high. I think there was a switch in Survivor somewhere, and really no one took notice. I think the switch is or was being the best player, being the Aussies, being the Boston Robs, being the Sandras, or not the Sandras, but the Boston Robs, the Ruperts, or whatever. That is no longer the way to win this game. And I know Rupert didn't win. I get all that. I'm just saying that's not the way to play anymore. If you look at the last maybe 2 or 3 seasons of Survivor, who's been winning? It's been the people who have been perceived this weak. I don't ask me their name, okay? But I do remember Gabler's name, and the winner right before his season. I want to say it was the young lady from Ghana, South Africa. I forget. But the point is, no one saw her as a threat the entire season until the very last second. And I do mean the last second. We're talking about the final tribal. That's when she erupted and became this phoenix that everyone just was like blown away by. But are we in a new era of Survivor where the underdogs win the game? We saw that in this episode where Franny goes home. Franny played the tried and true Survivor game where you want to be a powerhouse. You want to win everything. I just saw this in Big Brother not long ago with Michael. You cannot, when you win, you paint yourself as a target. How many more seasons will it take for players to realize that? At this particular point, I'm throwing it to Danny. All right, in the award challenge, Danny, you can have it. Because at this point, I think the writing's on the wall. If you win, you lose. That's the new paradigm. And I'm not sure if people are updating their processes. But yeah, in terms of underdogs, let me just make sure I lay out who I perceive as an underdog, because I know everyone sees this game differently. Okay, for underdogs, I see Yam Yam, Lauren, and Jamie being those kind of players. I know Yam Yam is somewhere on the fence, but when you look at Yam Yam, at least when I do, I don't see him having any alliance members really. I mean, I know he has Carson and Carolyn, but I personally think Carson will sacrifice Yam Yam at the drop of a dime. And I think Carolyn has already shown in this episode that she has more allegiance to other players like Franny more so than she has to Yam Yam. And we already know that Yam Yam and Carolyn don't have the best relationship. So I see Yam Yam as a player who's kind of like on the outs. And the only reason he hasn't gone is because of what I just stated, because players are focusing on the bigger threats. For example, Franny, Danny, for an example. Danny should be the next person going if my theory stands correct. Or better yet, within the next 2 episodes, I believe that Danny will see his way out. He was supposed to go out this episode. Carolyn was posturing so hard to get Danny out. No one was listening to her, which is no surprise. Now, in terms of power players, here's who I see. Carson. And I know Carson could also be considered an underdog, but the reason I don't think he is because he's winning. He won in this episode. He won the immunity challenge. And, that's his second puzzle to according to my calculations. Danny is a power player. Carolyn, to me, is a power player. And here's why I say that. Because as the viewers, we all know that she's far from an underdog. We know that she has an idol. We know that she's super intelligent. So in the game itself, sure. I mean, maybe Danny would call her underdog. But us as viewers, I'm not sure if that necessarily holds up. I see her as a huge threat. Heidi is a power player in my personal opinion. So, yeah, I mean, I think between the 3 underdog players, there is a shot there. I'll make a case for Jamie. Jamie is so naive. She's bubbly. She always has a smile on her face. She almost got in trouble this episode, but, how much trouble did she get in when she didn't go home? I don't know if people perceive her as a threat, even with an idol, and I think that says a lot. Jamie with an idol was still not as big enough of a threat to remove her over Franny, who everyone knows does not have an idol. They didn't even split the vote. So to me, it just shows how more dangerous Franny is perceived to be in the game than Jamie. Lauren is a player who is completely under the radar, and don't sleep on Lauren, because I think that Lauren has the type of gameplay where she gets along with everybody. She's even turning Danny, someone who is completely or has been completely against her for so long. And in this episode, we saw Danny talk strategy with Lauren. So, that says a lot that she's able to kind of weasel herself into your heart and make you love her. And she has the perfect gameplay for this new era of Survivor where you stay out the way, and then when you get to the final tribal, you just kind of pull your shirt open and you realize it's been Superwoman the entire time or Superman the entire time. I mean, did you see Gabler last season? Gabler came out of nowhere. Now, no, he came out of nowhere. I'm not going to even sit here and have this moment of revisionist history where I say I knew Gabler was going to win. I had no idea. No one knew that Gabler was going to win last season. And then, of course, Yam Yam. So I say that I don't think that an underdog will win this season because I've already picked my two, and I'm going to stick with my picks. And just in case you don't know, because I love reminding people that my two picks are still in the game. All right, my second place pick was Heidi, and my first place pick is Carson. So I want to just keep on saying, I want to make sure it's on record because for some reason, within the top 7, my two players are still in. I love that. But anyway, what do you think? Make sure you let me know in the comment section, and I'll happily respond because I don't really know. But anyway. So just a quick recap. Franny feels betrayed about the Kane vote, and how bad was it for Franny over the last 2 episodes? First Kane going home, and then this episode she goes home. That was a tough break for Franny. Franny wins her 3rd individual challenge, and this is really where all the dust starts to kick up because over the last 5 individual challenges, she's won 3. I told you, I felt like this woman was a freak of nature. I mean, how impressive has she been? And I think that there's a big argument out there which states that Franny should have kind of threw a couple challenges here and there. And like I said, how many more seasons will it take for these more dominant players to realize that, being, having that moment of light and having Jeff put the little chain on your neck and all that, that's all short-sighted. You want to be the person like Yam Yam, Carolyn. They're so bad at this game that nobody's looking at them for that particular reason by itself. Matter of fact, if we look at the worst award challenge or challenge performers, they're all just about completely safe. All right, let's look at it. Yam Yam always comes in the bottom 3, and he's completely safe. Lauren always in the bottom 3, completely safe. Jamie always in the bottom 3, completely safe. Carson not safe because he always wins. Danny not safe because he always comes in maybe the top 3. Carolyn is like she's in a league of her own. Man, she's safe though ultimately because nobody, like I said, if you're in the game, you don't see Carolyn as a threat. I see her as a threat because I'm watching her on the TV. But again, she always comes in somewhere in the last place of somewhere, and that is why no one's looking at her. Heidi, does Heidi do well in challenge? I think Heidi is the perfect. Like she's in the middle of the road, and this is why I like Heidi so much. But again, winning these challenges is so overrated now, and I think over time, players will have to figure out, do you want to win the game or do you want to win a game? The game or a game? You have to make a decision. All right, anyway, Franny makes what I would call a critical decision after winning, and she chooses to take Carolyn, Lauren, and Heidi to Sanctuary. What did you think about that? Did you think that she picked the right people, the wrong people? Carolyn, I mean, it's easy to say in hindsight she picked the wrong people. Lauren, where did that come from? Heidi, where did that come from? If I think, and I'm not trying to use hindsight to my advantage here, but I think the right people to take would have been Danny, Yam Yam, and fine. Take Carolyn, fine. But I would have kept Danny and Yam Yam close to me because Yam Yam is incredibly influential. And then Danny is a powerhouse player. And I would have looked forward and said, who could possibly win the immunity challenge? Because that person will have some say-so at camp. But anyway, those are maybe the 3 players I would have picked to go if I was Franny. Anyway, there's a conversation that happens at the Sanctuary where Danny becomes a big topic of discussion. And again, Carolyn is jockeying so hard to get Danny out, but no one is listening to her. And if Danny goes on to win this season, which I don't see happening at all, because I think he's going to go home within the next 2 episodes, but that's just me. But if he goes on to win, you can only imagine how loud Carolyn will be. I told you! You know how she talks. Anyway, did Franny pick the right people? I don't think so. The remaining 4 plot against Franny. So this is the big issue with winning these type of challenges that take you away from camp, because it sends those other 4 players back to camp hungry, wet, and certainly angry. All right. And this was even more so the case because Franny's picks were able to see their family letters. And this only made things and matters more difficult for those people who went back. That being Yam Yam, Danny, Jamie, and Carson. And as you can only imagine, Danny is like a master manipulator. There were two people that showed me that they are master manipulators this episode. One of them being Danny. Everything that comes out of Danny's mouth is strategy. And I do mean everything. Another player, Carson. These two players, every single word, and I do mean every single one, is meant to throw you off, guide you to who they want to go home, or something of that effect. Every single word. Anyway, Danny flies through the immunity challenge. So we get to the immunity challenge, and of course, again, Franny was painted as the target. Jamie does unveil that she had an idol. What did you think about that? That was a really interesting situation because she came clean, she told the truth, but no one believed her, which I found to be pretty interesting. But then again, if I'm in the game, I'm probably feeling the same way. Like, that just sounds too good to be true. And they're going to probably get a good laugh out of this when they go watch it back. But anyway, Danny flies through the first leg of the immunity challenge. And of course, behind him or not far from him is Franny. But one thing I like about Survivor challenges is that they're not just one dimensional. So even though Danny powered through the athletic part and Franny as well, when it came to the puzzle and unlocking things, that requires a different muscle, not necessarily physical muscle. It takes mental muscle and things of that nature. So this is where Carson was able to make up ground. He finally got to the puzzle. And because this guy has literal miniature puzzles, literal miniature puzzles at his home that he's created for himself, he is able to fly through these things. Now, he almost got caught up, and Franny almost caught the guy, but ultimately it was Carson who won. So I was very impressed with that. And I think just maybe he is starting to become more and more of a threat. Now, what's still surprising to me is no one's saying Carson's name. It's like they see him as an 18-year-old, 19-year-old kid, and they just can't conceive that he's smarter than what he's letting on. I've come to the conclusion that if I'm ever on Survivor, I'm going to automatically realize that everybody is on this show for a reason. Every single one of them is like a top tier deceiver. And I think that might be something that a lot of players on the show right now forgot. Carolyn, I mean, you look at her, you don't see it, but she's a top tier deceiver. Carson, same thing. Young, so what? Glasses, so what? NASA, they don't know that part. But anyway, Franny, Jamie, and Danny are the targets immediately after the immunity challenge is over. They go back, and there's a lot of talk about these three players. Again, Franny because she's a super threat. Danny because he's pretty much swayed every vote, and I believe Carolyn is the one who brings that up. And of course, Jamie because of the whole idol debacle. Danny puts his foot in his mouth. Danny does a lot of talking, and I think that he's coming across very abrasive. And I believe, like I said, Carolyn is the one who points that out. Like, hey, are we going to really let Danny, dictate the next vote or another vote? And of course, they do. Anyway, Heidi becomes a target for some reason. It's mainly because she's attached to Danny, and she goes around, and I don't know if it's a good thing or bad thing, but Heidi goes around and tells everyone Danny's plan, saying, hey, Danny has the votes. She kind of spills some beans on that. She says, Danny has the votes to get Franny out, and he says he doesn't even need my vote. And this pretty much causes a mini chaos or mini fire around the camp where everyone's trying to figure out, well, who's voting with Danny? Like, how did this happen? And little does everyone know that Danny, for whatever reason, is working with Lauren and players like Yam Yam. But we get to Tribal Council, and this is one of the craziest seasons ever as it relates to a plan being orchestrated perfectly. I don't think I can recall any season where there's maybe 20 or so plans at Tribal Council. I mean, I've seen some really bad Tribal Councils where there's probably 5 plans maybe, but this is the first time that there's been so many plans at Tribal Council that the players don't even know which one they're following. We've seen this before. Like I said, this is not completely new. I've seen players completely confused at Tribal Council, and then they start to whisper to each other. I've seen that before, but this is one of the first times I've seen it consecutively. I'm just seeing it over and over again, and it makes for good Survivor TV because I'm sitting there watching like, dude, Who's going home? There's 4 players that could potentially go home. You're watching a normal season of Survivor when there's only 2 players. Okay, it's like, okay, this person's gonna go home or this person's gonna go home. But when it's 4 players that can go home potentially, you're watching a good season right there. Franny, Jamie, Danny, or Heidi. Who knew who was going home? I had no idea. I thought that maybe Jamie was gonna go home. If you asked me to pick right there on the spot, I thought Jamie would be the one who bit the dust because, again, she had an idol. But then it kind of reoccurred to me after I saw the results that this season is different. All right. It's really, I should say, maybe not even this season. The last 3 or so seasons have been different, meaning that the underdogs are the ones that are the most safe. And I think that future players of Survivor will start to realize that one way or the other, they'll say, hey, I want to stay in the background. I don't want to win anything. I don't want to stir the boat one way or the other to get someone out. I just want to place my vote thing, and keep it pushing. And on the flip side, players will say, wait a minute, we know how this goes. The last 4 seasons have been won by underdogs. Let's get rid of the quiet player. I mean, that could happen as well. But anyway, Franny goes home. Were you surprised about that? Do you think Danny's conniving and savage play will eventually cost him? I do. I think that he's been like a savage hitman. And he, once he says your name out loud, you're done. He's like the Godfather almost. He reminds me of Carla of last season, the male version, the more aggressive male version. But I do think, just like Carla, when we get to maybe, like I said, over the next 2 episodes or so, I believe Danny's going to bite the dust. He's just playing too hard. I believe both him and Heidi have some things to worry about. And if not in the next 2 episodes, certainly within the final 4, because no one is going to want to take Danny to the end. Like nobody, unless they're crazy. And I will also point out that Danny has not been a competition threat because he just hasn't won much. I mean, he's placed well. I mean, but second place is last place in my book. And perhaps the smartest decision that Danny made was getting rid of Franny so that now he can get in first place, because I want to say that Franny and Carson primarily are the only 2 players that seem to get in his way. So with, Franny out the way and maybe Carson growing as a target, who knows what can happen. But nevertheless, thank you for watching. I appreciate it. And I'll see you on the next one. Peace.